Well, all right, everybody, check it out. It is our engine. A lot of people have been asking for another fire station video, and I haven't done one in a while. And I'm actually driving this thing tonight, which I don't do very often or not. So I figured I'd walk you through some basics of an engine driving checkout here. So pretty much, you got to make sure all your stuff works before you go on a call. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get in, and these things, the way it works is you got a battery switch here to turn it on and off. It's all push button start, so I got to turn on the ignition first. Let it idle for just a second. Then push button start. There we go. As you can see, I mean, it's just a same thing you guys have seen from the other side of the seats before. But one of the things you really want to do, make sure all your lights are working. So first off, turn on the emergency master light switch, which is what I did right here. That turns on all of my lights. Got to walk around your vehicle, make sure they're all working. I gotta watch out that I'm not too close to the road here. And yes, we know that one doesn't work. That's your water gauge, tells you how full your tank is. Here's your passenger side inputs and your discharge. Actually, let me correct that. This is your passenger side discharges. This is your passenger side input on the bottom over there. This is the valve to open it up if I do connect to a hydrant through that one. Unfortunately, I know the camera view, I don't have much room between the bay door and where we're at, so I can't show you too much at a good angle of this. We'll come back to this in a minute. This is our pump panel. But basically, that's checking out all the lights on the thing. Did a quick walk around. You always want to do a walk around on your vehicles. You didn't notice when I've already walked around this thing. I'm just doing this for you guys. When you check this thing out, you're always going to be looking at things like looking at the wheels, the tires, checking all your doors, make sure all your doors are shut, or your cab doors. You know that door is not shut because it's there ready for a call. But pop this thing into what's called pump gear, and that's where the engine driver job gets interesting, because most people think of the drivers on these things as like on an ambulance. You're somebody who's driving to a call. You're then driving the patient to the hospital. On the engine, there's a lot more involved with driving. The driver is in charge of hooking up to fire hydrants and running the water, getting the water to the crews that are actually inside. And it's not complicated, it just looks complicated to do, but it takes a lot of training to be able to get there and do it. And I've been certified as a driver for about a year now. I've only driven on a handful of calls, but I've been a certified driver for quite a while. I'm usually the engine officer, but tonight I needed to be the driver instead. So to put this thing into pump gear, it's interesting because it runs off of the same drivetrain. So you literally, there's a switch down here. I gotta make sure I'm in neutral. As you can see, I'm in neutral. I will take this thing, I will move this down into the middle position, and this is actually like switching the transfer case from the road to pump. And I'm gonna put it down into pump. I have this one light that says I'm now engaged in the pump. And then we move over here. This is just like if I were hit drive to put this thing from park to drive. This actually puts the pump gear into drive. It runs off of the same transmission, and the same, just the transfer case switches over between the two. So you hit drive, move back down here, and you wait for this second light to come on. There it is. So now we're in pump. You can also hear, I don't know how well you can actually hear the sound, you can hear that pump gear actually kick in. So this is what you need to be if you want to go flow some water to a fire hydrant. And this is your pump panel. I'm going to stand back in a place where hopefully you guys can see the whole pump panel to its glory. I'm pretty sure you see most of it there. I'm kind of against the other vehicle that's right behind me, but it looks complicated, but I'll tell you, it really isn't that complicated. I'm gonna do one thing, and then we're gonna come back and I'm gonna do it with the engine off so you guys can actually hear what's going on. But one of the things I wanna test real quick is we run by this, I'm drawing a blank on what this thing is called, but as opposed to a total pressure master, we are running off of a, I'm gonna think of the word for this. But I wanna check it. So I'm gonna go into RPM mode. This is just for testing. You usually run it in pressure mode, but just for testing, I'm gonna hit preset, which is gonna take you to a preset RPM of 1,000. Increase it a little bit, about 1,200. And then we're gonna pull the primer. Pull the primer. You can hear that, and look what the primer is doing. It's actually priming some water. So now I'm gonna go, hold on, we're gonna go into idle. Let me turn this thing down so we can actually talk without the engine running. So to turn it into the other way first, most importantly, go into neutral first before messing with that. I accidentally did try to pop this thing from pump to road without going into neutral first. It makes the worst sound you'll ever hear in your life. So, neutral. One light went off because I'm in neutral. Now I'll go back up to the middle. Back up into road. So now if I were to hit this thing in a drive, we're actually driving an engine at this point again. So let me shut this thing down and I'll be back with you guys. So I told you guys I would come back later and show you with the engine not running anymore so you can see more of this pump panel. And I don't know if you'll notice, but this is a different pump panel than I showed you in the last time, and that's because we actually got a brand new engine here at Station 5, and it's fantastic, but I can't finish the video on the other pump panel, which I didn't get to finish last week because it's gone to the shop. So I'll just show you what I was going to show you on this one. This one's kind of cool. Whereas remember I did that primer and it was really loud. I had to pull something out to do that primer. This is our new primer right here, and it's not on right now, so it's not going to make any noise. But oh, it's a push. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, you can do it. Listen to that. So that's the sound that this one makes. And as you can, I don't know if you can actually see down there underneath, got some water coming out there for the prime. And this one is different than the last one. This one apparently is a hydraulic prime, as opposed to having a little motor behind there. It uses the hydraulic fluids to pull things up. I actually don't know as much about it at all because it was, I didn't realize it was gonna be a hydraulic one. It's kind of cool because it's quiet and it's not gonna burn out a motor. You can actually run it for a lot longer, I'm told, and it's always gonna be fine. So that's pretty cool. But for the most part, as you can see, set up very similar, but slightly different. These two side discharges are just on the side as opposed to being over top like they were in the other one. Here's the main intake still. Slightly different handles the way you open things up. Like some of them before were a push button, like this one right here. Here's my front inlet. This red light is on right now because it's closed. If I push this green button over here, you can start opening it up and you'll see red turned off. If I keep opening it all the way up, it'll show a green light in a minute when it's all the way open. So there you go. So that shows me my front inlet is completely open. We'll shut that and I'll go show you the front inlet. So that is not this one though. This is the driver's side inlet, which actually is controlled by, we'll wait till this closes. There we go. Red light back on. It's controlled by this now. So you turn this and it will start to open the driver's main inlet. As you can see right there, it says driver's main inlet. And you have to actually spin this around. And you can see my little gauge is going to show me my driver's inlet is opening up. Now they do some of these things different for different reasons. One of the reasons that you would have like a push button for this inlet versus a screw for this inlet right here is partially so you don't get confused. And things are actually different on the pump panel so that I know if I'm pushing this button, I'm not dealing with this right here. I need to push this. You just get to know these things in your head and where they're located. And some of it's based on, this is actually an electrical inlet, whereas this is completely mechanical and you spin it and I'm directly opening the inlet up, whereas this one's got an electric running down there to get the inlet going open based on where it's at, because here's that side inlet, that side intake versus the front intake. This is the other one that we opened up. Now you'll see over here, those are some guys actually preparing for a pre-trip on the ambulance. They're taking the EVOC class for ambulances, so they're practicing right now for it. And over here, this would be my passenger side inlet. Right there, passenger main inlet. Same type of system as on the other side, but it's kind of cool the way that there's different different buttons that do the same function, but there's a purpose for why they're actually different as opposed to it all being the same. If everything was just the same exact button, you would literally be like, especially in the heat of a fire. I could, if I had these buttons everywhere, I can clearly see myself just being like, whoa, I need to get this done, and push the button and realize that you're pushing the wrong button because you didn't read just this little thing above it and says where it's at if they were all the exact same. But it's a lot easier to tell when they're different. But here you got your little gauge panels, and these are for all the different outtakes that you got on this thing, or outputs that you have on here. For one, this is the number one crosslay. Here's the number one crosslay. It's this right here. Here's my boom. Number two crosslay is up here. This is my number two crosslay. Front discharge. So up front we have 100-foot section hose up there. You can do that with this. Number one driver side discharge. This would open up this discharge right here, as you can see. Number one driver side discharge. Number one driver side discharge. I mean, that's the way it works. It's much more simplistic than it actually looks. It just looks complicated, but pumping is really not that hard. It's all about pressures and knowing how much hose you have. See, let's open this up. So if I open this, doing this one-handed, I'm going to reveal my crosslays. And you'll see I have one nozzle pointed toward me, and I have no nozzle over here. That's because this bed right here is set up for an officer side discharge or a passenger side deployment. So my nozzle's facing that way because I have to go that way. This nozzle's facing this way, so it's ready for me to deploy off of this side in case the fire's on this side of the engine. You'll deploy this nozzle, and you'll get to the fire. You can still deploy this from this side. You just gotta pull it this direction and know how you're pulling it. Notice this nozzle is toward the center between these two. This nozzle for this one is also in the center because you got to think it's set up for deployment, such as if I came up here and was going to deploy that nozzle right there, I would want to walk away from the engine with this in just the right position. So I want this on my right shoulder. So what I would do is I would actually pull this out part way, walk up to it, pull it onto my right shoulder, walk forward, and then turn around, drop my skid load onto the ground, and walk toward the fire. If you're gonna do that with the opposite side deployment, which you can do, you gotta remember if I try to pull this nozzle load out first, it's gonna get stuck because the nozzle's too big. You actually gotta drop your skid load first, and then you can pull your nozzle this direction if I want to deploy it off to this side. So that's how that setup and it works. But what I actually opened this up to show you was, if you see, this is a fog nozzle, and if I can focus in there, you see how it says 175 GPM, 75 PSI? What that means is this nozzle will flow 175 gallons per minute at a pressure of 75 PSI. So what you have to do is you have to figure out how much pressure, as this is part of the driver's responsibility, figuring out how much pressure do I need to give through my engine to put out the appropriate amount of water into a particular nozzle. To do that, you have to have the knowledge of what your nozzle is, which this one is a 75 PSI nozzle to give me 175 GPM, and you have to know your friction laws. You also have to know if there's any appliances in the way. You have to know elevation. There's some more stuff to it, but the basics are knowing your friction loss, which is how much pressure I'm losing through the line just based on the distance of the line, and then how much pressure I'm utilizing through that nozzle to give me my stated 175 GPM at 75 PSI. And there's calculations for that. There's the Q formulas, there's coefficient formulas depending on how you learned it. There's street math is kind of what people use here, and the rule of thumb is that you're going to have 30 PSI friction loss per 100 square feet, or excuse me, for 100 feet of hose line. It's not perfect, but it gets you about there. So based on that, this is a 200 foot 1 3/4 line with a 175 GPM, 75 PSI nozzle on it. So I'm going to have 30 times 2 because I have 30 per 100 foot. I have 200 feet, so 60 PSI loss for friction loss. I need to add to that 75. So you got 75 plus 60, and this is where you can also do street math. 75 plus 75 is 150 minus 15, because there's a difference between 60 and 75. 135. If I ran this particular line at 135, that's pretty much where it needs to be. Probably actually run it a little bit lower than that, and let somebody tell you if they need to, like they need you to boost the pressure up. That's pretty much how it works. And the same goes for all the lines on here. So what you'll see is, so if I was pulling this one, which would be my number 2, if I was pulling from this side, I would have to open this up and make sure that this gauge showed me 135 PSI right here. I'm trying to hold this up at the same time. I would have to get my pressure gauge right up here to about 135 PSI to know that I'm running this at the right spot. And using the governor, which is what these have, that's the word I couldn't think of, the governor on this thing. I would set this to 135. And then what it's gonna do is it's gonna have my presets of my whole engine at 135 PSI. And if I open this all the way up, if I pull it all the way out, it's gonna put 135 out to that line. Where it gets tricky is if you have multiple lines running that need to run at a different PSI. Like for instance, that is a 200-foot line up here on the front bumper. We, however, have a bumper load of a 100-foot line. So this is a 100-foot line. It's the same size, got the same type of nozzle on the end, a 75 PSI, 150 GPM, or excuse me, 175 GPM, 75 PSI nozzle. So it's the exact same nozzle on half the line. So what are we gonna do? 30 per 100 foot, you got 30, only times 1 plus 75. So I'm only gonna be running this line at 95. Well, what if I'm running, or excuse me, 100. I'm gonna be running this thing at 105. Not 95, 105. But what if I have this line running? So I have to have my pump set to put out 135 according to this number here. I pull this and I pull that front line. I can't just open it all the way up because that's going to be putting 135 PSI through that line as well, and that's going to be too powerful for that. It's going to make it out of control. Your water might be a little funny pattern. So what you do is it's called gating it back. So you'll find your front discharge here. This being a brand new engine, I'm still here it is right here. I'm still trying to get familiar with exactly where everything's at. But here's my front discharge. I would open this guy up all the way. I'd pull it all the way out. It would be running at 135. And I pull this one, I would just pull it out until I reached 105 on this nozzle. So it wouldn't be all the way out. That's how you deal with getting different nozzles running off of one engine pump at different pressures. So the whole point of this video is to show you the driver on an engine might have a completely different responsibility than a lot of people out there realize. I'll tell you, before I joined the fire service, I didn't know how important the driver's job was on the fire ground. I assumed engine driver, just like an ambulance driver. You go there, you come back. That's your job. The driver of the engine actually has a very, very, very significant responsibility on the fire ground, and it's fun. And I've been doing it for a year, but I haven't been actually driving for very long. I am actually driving tonight, so I did get to take this our brand new engine out for a spin earlier today. Haven't had any calls on it yet tonight, but you know what? We'll get there. We'll get some calls on it. It's different. It's fun. It's new. It's exciting, but it's harder work just to know all the things, remember where everything's at, know where all my appliances are. And now that this is a brand new engine, I've got to relearn this inventory. It's not that much different. It's actually organized much better and more conveniently than our old engine was, but I knew that old engine. I knew it inside and out. So now I got a whole new endeavor to start. But anyways, guys, it's a little insight into the way engine drivers in the fire service work. Hopefully I explained it in a way that you can understand and you guys enjoyed and didn't get too technical, or maybe not technical enough for some people. I don't know. We can continue making these videos. Let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see what I can do for you. All right, guys. See you next time.